The TV show Ted Lasso, about an American football coach who is hired to train a British soccer team, is filled from top to bottom with esoteric lessons of manifestation and magic. And after studying hundreds of occult books and materials of the Rosicrucian Lodge, you would see it too. My thesis is that it is not about reading meaning into the series, but it's there objectively. Normies are being shown esoteric and, in a broad sense, spiritual content, and by implementing the lessons from the series, your lives can rise to a completely different level. I don't know if any particular secret Hollywood societies were involved in the show, or if it was all the work of just one character named Brett Goldstein, but in one of the episodes the main character literally drinks psilocybin tea and a voice in his head starts explaining Pythagoreanism through Masonic symbols and the Seal of Solomon, so I'm clearly not going crazy. Of course, apart from that, the series is also typical modern propaganda in the classic Netflix style. Coaches condemn Goldstein's character because he's unhappy that his new girlfriend just fucked her ex after starting going out with him, her new love. They joke about how the Virgin Mary wasn't aware that the ultimate evil in the world was Hitler. The series also tells a tearful story about how terribly stressful it is for gays to come out to the world and how important it is to accept them as they are. And in addition, about how Africans suffer in the post-colonial era and how whites aren't helping them actively enough. Despite all this modern matrix bullshit, brainwashing that works on liberal modern women, really acting for them as a moral judge and a teacher of ethics, a sane modern man who knows God will, I think, be able to find in this emotionally positive and light TV show useful lessons for self-development and spiritual growth. Just like the alchemists described finding the philosopher's stone in a pile of dirt on the roadside. The first coaching practice of Ted Lasso that will change your life is also one of the most important and central themes of the series. It can be summed up with one key word: belief. The inscription on the paper that Ted Lasso hung in the locker room literally became the leitmotif of the entire show, and had its own special storyline and resolution at the end. The footballers initially treated the inscription and the principle it represented with skepticism and arrogance in the period of their losses, but in the end they collected the torn paper piece by piece, already convinced of the power of the message from their coach, and actually won. It may seem trivial at first glance, but faith is the central and key principle of all traditions known to us, from mass religions, whether the Abrahamic like Christianity, Islam and Judaism, or Eastern paganism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and also occult traditions. Even witchcraft like Gardnerian Wicca is based on the element of faith, not to mention numerous New Age systems like Peter Carroll's chaos magic, New Thought manifestation practices, or Vadim Zeland's reality transurfing. And it's not necessarily about faith as a metaphysical assertion of truth or dogmatic belief in certain concepts, but rather about a state of serene trust in the universe and the will of chance. For example, Sattva in Sanskrit means faith. It is considered one of the highest values and the primary factor on the path to enlightenment, to nirvana, because according to Buddhist teaching, Sattva generates energy, viriya. Energy leads to understanding of the goal, sati. Understanding leads to concentration of thought, samadhi, concentration of thought to insight and wisdom, prajna. Emuna, a concept in Judaism about the ability to rely on the Almighty. Often, in modern Hebrew, it's primitively translated just as faith. But the word emuna originally means the ability to rely on someone. A person with emuna knows that the Almighty loves him, that he should rely on the Almighty, trust him, knowing that everything he sends him is for the best. And despite what Solomon writes in Proverbs, the simple believe every word but the prudent give thought to their steps, emuna is understood as such a state of the believer's soul that surpasses simple rational thinking and bringing him closer to the higher divine source in a way that mere human reason never could, enriches and transforms him. Quoting, "Emuna, however, is an innate conviction, a perception of truth that transcends rather than evades reason." Quite the contrary, wisdom, understanding and knowledge can further enhance through emuna. Nevertheless, emuna is not based on reason. Reason can never attain the certainty of emuna, since, reasonably speaking, a greater reasoning might always come along and prove your reasons wrong. In this way, emuna is similar to seeing firsthand. Reason can help you better understand what you see, but it will have a hard time convincing you that you never saw it. So too, emuna endures even when reason can't catch up. Naturally, we also all perfectly remember how fundamentally important faith is in Christianity. Christ heals the sick according to their faith, tells Peter not to lose faith even during the storm so that he can continue walking on the water, and explains to his disciples that if they had faith the size of the mustard seed, They could move mountains at will. The importance of faith in true religion cannot be overestimated. Vadim Zeland, in almost every other book, writes that once you know what you want, have created the intention, and started spinning a new slide, you must let the universe act on its own without expecting desires to be fulfilled exactly in the way and at the moment you imagined, because this limits the ways by which desire can materialize from the space of variations. This is the binding element of human striving to predict everything and think algorithmically, but with Taoists' ease, akin to the principle of Wu Wei, letting go of this dependence on a single realization path, the goal will inevitably be achieved. Inevitably. The same method exists in chaos magic algorithm for the realization of intent. First, vividly and emotionally desire the goal. Second, renounce the desire and forget about it. Third, receive the result. The second magic practice of Ted Lasso, the goldfish method. In one episode, when the footballer Sam makes a mistake on the field, starts worrying about it and gets stuck in guilt and self-flagellation, Ted reveals the meaning of the method to him. Quote, "You know what the happiest animal on earth is? It's a goldfish. Why? Got a 10-second memory. Be a goldfish, Sam." This becomes a meme of the series. David Hawkins, in his hierarchy of levels of human consciousness, places shame and guilt at the very bottom of the vibrational scale, and Joe Dispenza in his books and research analyzes and proves in detail how constant replay of negative episodes in consciousness and self-flagellation leaves an imprint throughout the entire body, and eventually the body itself, having memorized these emotions, begins to constantly replay them, feeding them back to consciousness and influencing the whole life, the surrounding reality. Therefore, the sound and appropriate use of the goldfish memory is absolute genius shit for achieving success. I remember streamer Jorka once told in one of his streams how, when he was training gym bros who periodically broke down on fast food, he used his method called the amnesia pill. Like, the worst thing you can do after you've broken the necessary diet and binged on junk food is to enslave your self-perception as the one who failed through self-flagellation. By blaming yourself for the sleep, you confirm and cement the perception of yourself as someone who constantly breaks down, makes mistakes, and makes choices that hinder progress. The best thing you can do is just fucking forget it. And indeed, as the Athonite monk and theologian Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain writes in The Invisible Warfare, every time you fall into some pardonable transgression, even if it happens 1,000 times a day, as soon as you notice, do not torture yourself and so waste your time without profit, but at once humble yourself. And conscious of your weakness, turn to God with hope and call to Him from the depths of your heart. Or as Confucius said, our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Renunciation of connection with negative past experience on the path is not only a Christian approach, but also characteristic of the pagan philosophy of the Stoics. Marcus Aurelius emphasized living in the present, stating, "Confine yourself to the present," to avoid stress from the unchangeable past. He also suggested that one has the power to control their thoughts and reactions, which are the true source of inner strength, and so to move past previous wrongs by rejecting the sense of injury they caused. He wrote, "It is not the weight of the future or the past that is pressing upon you, but ever that of the present alone. Even this burden, too, can be lessened if you confine it strictly to its own limits." And likewise, the Apostle Paul writes in the Epistle to the Philippians, Brethren, I do not regard myself as having laid hold of it yet, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and reaching forward to what lies ahead. Moving on. The third approach of Ted Lasso is have fun instead of victory. To the ordinary normie consciousness expressed in the footballers he coaches, it seems counterintuitive. How can you focus on the process itself rather than the result? Isn't that the wrong algorithm that should inevitably lead to failure? Well, as you surely know from the popularized concept of the law of detachment in New Thought, that's not the case. In fact, excessive fixation on successful outcome mystically and paradoxically constantly repels it. New Age esotericists typically explain this with the law of vibration from the Kybalion. The state of need for success fixes a mental, spiritual, or vibrational, call it as you like, state of lack, a state of absence of success, and therefore it becomes harder to attract it. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance, but from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. Matthew 25:29. You trigger mechanisms that are constantly reproducing the same scenario, the scenario of absence of victory, because all your behavior is tied to this, and the desired result cannot break through the shell of the created modus of reality. built in all aspects around your inner disposition of soul, akin to the Hermetic law as within, so without. That's why in chaos magic, one of the important elements of the algorithm, right after desiring the goal, is renounce the desire and forever forget about it. Fighting unhealthy attachment to the result is not only for Buddhists who wage war against all attachments as such, but also in our scripture you can find more than one episode pointing out how important it is to focus on what happens here and now, instead of constantly trying to determine your current psychic state by evaluating probabilities of future developments. For example, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Also, look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than them? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the lilies of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these." In short, Wu Wei. The next method is pattern breaking. Ted Lasso, when pressure falls on him most heavily, mocking and condemning him for failures and mistakes after he had a panic attack during a match, responds to this challenge of fate in a completely unexpected way. Instead of justifying himself at the press conference, playing on pity, or lashing back with aggression in response to unfair criticism, he breaks the pattern of the situation, starts laughing at himself and cracking witty jokes at his own expense. Since no one expected such a reaction from him, the public buys into his self-irony, and as a result, Ted Lasso comes out unscathed. And everything ends relatively well for his public image. This is a hermetic principle well known to many, when a wise man kind of rises above the laws of fate, such as the law of rhythm or the law of cause and effect, not by overcoming them, but by placing himself above them, so that the swing of pendulum in the opposite direction doesn't touch him. He simply steps aside, instead of trying to resist its movement head-on. Vadim Zeland also writes about this in one of his books. He explains the principle of breaking the pattern. When the pendulum tries to drag you into the game on its own terms, for example, aggression, counter-aggression, or fear, submission, then in order to get out of the situation, you need to do something unexpected and out of script. His example: if thugs harass you on the street and start being aggressive, the usual options are either to be afraid and give them money, or snap back and get into conflict. Both are feeding the pendulum. That is the egregor. But you can break the pattern with a strange, illogical action that throws them off script. Zeland writes that it's enough, for example, to suddenly smile joyfully and say, "Oh guys, I know you. You were on TV yesterday." Or start acting in a way they simply don't understand what to do next. The idea is that the pendulum lives on predictable energy exchange, and when you throw in something off script, its program breaks and the situation dissolves. Further, Ted Lasso is a man who knows how to forgive. Spoilers ahead. He forgives Nathan, the main traitor who went to the competitors, Beard, who once tried to rob him, and even teaches Jamie Tart, one of the team's main players, to forgive his morally monstrous father, quote, "for Jamie's own sake." That is, Ted knows that forgiving offenders is useful for your own good. I'll go insane if I start listing all the reasons why forgiveness is an important spiritual practice. Forgiveness restores relationships with God and people. As you forgive, so you will be forgiven. It removes inner judgment and returns the heart to love and peace. Forgiveness reduces chronic tension and ruminative stress, freeing up attention and vital energy. Resentment is an energy bind, attachment, egregor, pendulum that feeds on you and controls you. Forgiveness breaks this bind, returns your strength and free will, energetic independence from the anchor of being an offended victim. In Russian we have a saying, "Water is carried by the offended." Christ did not teach to turn the other cheek, bless those who curse you, and love your enemies in order to live like a loser. I emphasize, he taught this not because he was some hippie from the Vietnam War era. Christ is not a hippie. We all know what he did to the merchants in the temple. As Zeland writes, if someone doesn't believe in you, wishes you harm, unjustly underestimates and slanders you, rejoice. He creates excess energetic potential so that the universe itself will prove to him that the critic was wrong. Now the bonus part. The Zava character. The best soccer player in the whole series, the main star of football and the most effective player. His main message is, you can do anything. Like that everyone is capable of everything they ever think of. He constantly meditates, behaves eccentrically, and allows himself to do whatever comes to mind. He inspires the goalkeeper to change his name to Van Damme because he likes it better that way. Meditation cannot be overestimated in magical spiritual practice. While realizing and accepting your gift of creation and seeing your possibilities as limitless is the best mindset in the world. And the magic of the name is one of the oldest practices representing the Aramaic principle abracadabra. As we say in Russian, as you name the ship, so shall it sail. It is no coincidence that every occultist initiated into a magical order always chooses for himself a magical name in addition to his profane one. This doesn't mean that you should today choose a new nickname like Lamborghini owner or biggest dick in town, but pay attention to what you associate yourself with and how you look at your life in general. Play around with Castaneda's assemblage point finally. That's my reminder to you. In short, the show is left liberal propaganda, like the entire modern entertainment industry. But a spiritually awakened person will find his gold here. The lips of wisdom speak only to the ears of understanding. Or he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Matthew 11:15. Good luck in your spiritual work, dumb fucks. Peace.